Welcome everyone to Advaita Vedānta Satsang Home. The ongoing sessions on Advaita Aparokshanubhuti, where Bindoji is using two reference texts. One is pinned above, which is an English literal translation offered by Swami Vimuktananda. And the Sanskrit text is from Acharya Vidyaranya, which is pasted in the chat. So all the other 40 sessions are available as replays on Clubhouse, or you can access them on the YouTube channel called Advaita Retold, and all the, not just Aparokshanubhuti, several of Bindoji's earlier talks are cataloged there. For housekeeping, I'll close the chat and temporarily have nobody can raise their hands. But once the session is done, like in about an hour, we can have the chat open, hand raising, if you have any questions. Over to you, Bindoji. Thank you.
Thank you, Prakash. Om Namo Brahmadibhyo Brahma Vidya Sampradaya Kartrabhyo Vamsha Rishibhyo Mahadbhyo Namo Gurubhyaha Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritanu Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Veda Vibhakine Vyomavat Vyapta Devaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Om Shri Gurubhyo. Aparokshanubhuti. Shri Harim Paramanandam Uvadeshtaramishwaram Vyapakam Sarvalokanam Karanam Tam Namamyaham. We are in the section where Acharya Shankara has reinterpreted the Raja Yoga methods of Yama, Niyama, etc. And the last one which we discussed in the last class was Pratyahara. To give a comparison between the two, in the classical yoga or the Raja Yoga or Patañjali Yoga, Pratyahara is defined as withdrawal of senses from objects. I'm just recapping this thing to going through the last class for the benefit of everyone. So, when the withdrawal of senses from objects, how do we do that? See, senses are vastu. Vastu will have its svabhava. That means when the eye is open, it has to see light, which is in the form of color or object and shape, etc. So this vision is the duty of the sense organ of eye, through which the senses are working. Eye is only the aperture. The eyeball and the retina or the iris is only an organ which is functioning. But the sense organ is different from the physical eye. Same way, physical ears are just on the either side of the head to receive the vibration of sound. But what is called sense organ is not these instruments, even though they are known by the same thing, like the chakshu, srotram, etc. That is the eye, the ears, etc. They engage with the objects depending upon the function of the sense organ. Now, engagement with the objects is a process by itself, which I am not going to getting into details now. but to give a simple answer or simple narration is that the consciousness or the awareness which is reflected through the mind is transferring its awareness through the aperture of the instrument of eye or the ear, etc., and travels to the object which is distant, or in the case of sound, the sound travels to the ear. And there is a merger of awareness of the sense carried awareness with the awareness of the object. So this is called Atma Chaitanya, then Vritti Chaitanya, and Vastu Chaitanya. These are the three ways in which it has been defined in the Shastras. So when these three merge together, we have the knowledge of the object. That is how it has been defined. Now, withdrawing the sense organ from the object, when it is a functional sense organ, how it is to be done is not very easy and has complications for it. Because how do I withdraw my ears when a sound is being heard? It is quite, possible. It's not quite possible to do that. Whereas Advaita reinterprets the whole thing as it is not a mere withdrawal, in the sense it is not that you are withdrawing the sense organs, but seeing the objects as nothing but Brahman. Yat pasyati, yat shrunoti. Whatever is being seen or whatever is being heard, you are not hearing or you are not seeing the object. But there is Brahman, Atman or Chaitanya or awareness in everything. That is, without awareness, nothing exists. When we know that, that is why Advaita is much more effective in doing this rather than the Patañjali yoga or the classical yoga. When we are substituting the object with the name and form as a representation of Brahman itself, whether it is in the form of sound or light, will depend upon the object as well as the sense organ. But how do we withdraw it? That is not very clear in the Yoga Marga. It is easy to define that, even though Vyasa has written a commentary on that and it is prescribed, given in detail in that. Advaitic method is by knowing that the objects, whether it is a visual object or a auditory object, nothing but representation, or they are nothing but Brahman, coming in the form of visual object or auditory sound. When we substitute that, the withdrawal doesn't have to happen. It becomes natural. In the sense that when everything is Brahman, where will you withdraw that to? The sense organs' engagement with the sensory objects, as long as it is not seen as separate, independently existing name and form, but as a reality of Brahman itself, which is appearing in the form of sound or a light or object or, visual input, everything becomes Brahman. Because all our experiences, the very life what we lived, or the very life experiences what we have, is nothing but awareness, consciousness or awareness, what we call it as. It is When we do not have that, we are not alive. Even in the state of deep sleep, when we do not have the sensory functions through the apertures of eyes, ears, etc., the existence aspect is felt by us as awareness. I am, but I knew nothing. That is the experience we have in the deep sleep. So there is no place where Brahman is not present. So where will you do a withdrawal of the sense organs? When everywhere it is Brahman, you cannot move it from one place to another place. So the Advaitic reinterpretation of with Pratyahara has much more effectiveness and easier for us to do that. There is something called Anvaya Vyatireka method, which is positive and negative, that is which I explained in the last class. Every object, whether it is a visual aspect of a pot or a sound of a bird or an animal or any other sound, all of these are perishable because none of them last forever. But there is something called existence or existence and awareness. We are knowing a pot because the pot exists, and we are knowing the pot because the pot is having awareness in the form of a existence. Its existence itself is the reason why we are aware of the pot. Same is the case with the sound also, or any other organ for that matter. This aspect of existence and awareness is neither created nor destroyed. A pot, when it is being created, the existence of the pot is there before in the mud or the clay. That existence is now, which is now being used for the existence of the pot. And when the pot is destroyed or broken, the same existence and awareness is now present in the pieces which is broken there. This is only an example. If you look into all the sensory inputs we have, there is an existence and awareness prior to the sensory knowledge happening. While the sensory happening, we acknowledge it. And even when the object is vanished from the sensory input region, the existence of that is not destroyed. Thus, the object is not an object by itself. That object is a name and form given to Brahman or Atman, which is Sat and Chit, existence and awareness. You call it as a substratum or you call it as a reality. The terminology is not important. We get carried away in the terminology. So when we have this Anvaya and Vyatireka, means negation and affirmation, we are affirming the presence that everything is Brahman by negating the name and form of the sensory inputs. But what happens to the mind? The Pratyahara, mind ceases chasing the names and forms. That is how do the Pratyahara being defined as the classic yoga. But in the true sense, the same mind, instead of ceasing to chase the name and form, that is what the withdrawal has been mentioned in the classical yoga. Advaita says that when everything is known as Brahman, Sarvam Khalu Idam Brahma, Neha Nanasti Kinchana, all those things are giving rise to the knowledge that nothing but Brahman or Atman is there. It is pure awareness everywhere. So the mind sinks into an ocean of awareness and resting in its own true nature. Mind's original nature is awareness itself. But when it forgets its own nature and identifies with the names and forms, it is deemed as a mind which is fluctuating because the objects of the mind are fluctuating. But if you really look into that, when the objects are not present, either by closing the sense organs or by withdrawal of it, or as per the Advaitic method, we substitute that everything is Brahman, the same mind is tranquil, eternal, and unabated. Nityam, Nirandaram, Satyam. So that feeling that Tat Satyamaham, Nityam Nirandaram, that knowledge that I am the reality or I am the truth or I am the Atman or Brahman, which is eternal, Nityam. Nirandaram means unabated. There was never a time I was not I. There will never be a time I will not be I. Whether I am waking, dream, or without day waking and dream, I am what I am is. So this is the true nature of the mind. That is why in the Taittiriya, when it is said that yato vacho nivartande aprapya manasa saha, I explained that in the Taittiriya second chapter explanation part of it. We know that the mind as the mind which we know has the dependency on the names because the objects have names and forms, and without content of the object or the thought, the mind is not mind. But when it is yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha, there is that mind where names and forms do not operate, and that mind ceases to become the mind. That becomes the reality of the Brahman. So the positive withdrawal, unlike the suppression which is in the classical yoga, Advaitic Pratyahara is a transformative seeing, and the world is not denied. The world is not denied. The phenomenal world is not denied. This is what I explained yesterday also in the last class. But the phenomenal world is names and forms of Brahman only. So what we are experiencing the world is Brahman. So what is the withdrawal which is Advaita talking about? It is not withdrawal, but abidance in oneself, or the awareness in oneself. It is not an escape. But one thing is for sure. The habits of the sense organs and the mind is to depend upon the nama rupa, or the names and forms. Only when this contemplative method of seeing them as names and forms of Brahman instead of names and forms of independent objects, that has to be a practice unless and until it becomes natural for us to be in that state. That is why the word abhyasaniya was used in the last class. Now we'll go to the second next verse is 122. Yatra yatra manoyati brahmanaha tatra darshanad manasaha dharanam chaiva dharana sa paramata. Sadharana paramata. That is the supreme dharana. Which one? Yatra yatra manoyati tatra tatra brahmana darshanat. Wherever the mind is engaged or functional, whatever is happening in the mind or whatever is being acknowledged by the mind, being aware of the object and everything, it is Brahmana Darshanat. It is seeing or realizing that they are all Brahman only. Such a mind which is engaged in the realization that everything is Brahman, that mind is called Dhāraṇā, mind. So Dhāranam is fixing, actual the meaning. Dhāryate is the root from where it is coming, means to abide, fix. That is the supreme Dhāraṇā. What we are talking about as per the Advaita. So all the senses, knowledge, experiences, awareness, emotions, feelings, thoughts, everything that is happening in the mind, see it as nothing but Brahman, or means awareness or consciousness. If it is there in the mind, it is because it is awareness. And it is awareness which is having names and forms, not different from Brahman. So what happens that in that state of Dhāraṇā, as per the Advaita, is that you are in a state of abidance in the self. Atma Jnana, Atma Nirvriti, Atma Kama. There are so many words used in the Upanishads. Atmarati, Atma Krida, Atma, all those words are used in the Upanishads for that purpose. You are engaging in yourself, you are playing with yourself, you are knowing yourself. There is nothing other than yourself. Because you are aware, that awareness, which is there in the mind, which is there in the objects, which is there in everything. So Sarvam Khalidam Brahma becomes a reality only when you have this Dhāraṇā, and when you abide in that, that is what the Upanishad is also saying. Yatra nanyat pasyati anyat shrunoti anyat vijanati. So when we know this, that the steadiness of the mind through the realization of Brahman, wherever mind goes, mind doesn't go anywhere. Mind apparently goes, but when the mind starts abiding in Brahman or realizing in Brahman, the mind is not going anywhere. Mind becomes an abidance in yourself. In the Patañjali Yoga, Dhāraṇā is holding the mind onto a something particular object. Here what we are talking about is that there is no object other than Brahman in the whole experience. Yat pasyati, yat shrunoti, yat vijanati, all of them whatever is seen, heard or known is Brahma eva, nothing but Brahman alone. So when that knowledge is shining in us, there is no particular object in which we can abide the mind. The mind itself is the object, and it is abiding in the mind itself. There is no separate mind and Atma separate. That is why the yatra yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasaha, when I explained, I said that the dependency on the name and form, when it is lost and substituted with the realization that the name and forms are nothing but the appearance of Brahman alone, that is where there is no words separate from Brahman, and there is no mind separate from Brahman. The mind itself becomes the Brahman. That is what is called the realization. This very moment, the mind with which we are transacting is nothing but Brahman. But we are depending upon the names and forms and thinking that the name and form are the reality. We forget that there is the existence awareness of every aspect of experience which we are going through. Pratibodha vididam matam. So, once we do that, there is no special effort required to be abiding in ourselves. This very moment, we are all abiding in ourselves. We are nothing but that, Tattvamasi. But it has to culminate as Aham Brahmasmi. There is no Aham separate. See, the moment we have the Aham separate and the object separate, even that object is Brahman. There is two. Judhyad vai bhayam bhavati. Idaram antaram kurute atatasya bhayam bhavati. Taittiriya Upanishad. All those things that is the very reason why we have a definition called moksha or mukti or realization. We created a confusion and a world by not knowing the nature of our own mind. And the mind where the forgetfulness is the reason. Forgetfulness is avidya, or what we call ignorance, or we call it in Advaita, we call it as Maya. That gives rise to the world, phenomenal world, as separate from the mind. When we do these practices and when we abide in the self, the dichotomy is destroyed and there is no more two there, na dvitiyam asti. There is no second one. Ekameva dvitiyam Brahma. There is only one Brahma. And that becomes the Dhāraṇā for us to abide in. Vidyaranya is explaining it in detail. Yatra yatra means yasmin padarte mano yadi gacchati. Which in whichever material, padartha means matter. Mano yadi means mind gets, gacchati. Tatra tatra brahmana sattadi matrasya. Nama yupekshaya. Darshanad anusandanat. Tatra tatra, wherever the mind goes, Brahmana sattadi matrasya means that is nothing but the existence aspect of Brahman. Unless something is existing, that mind cannot be going there. Nama yupekshaya. Nama yupekshaya means disregarding the names and forms. Darshanad means anusandanat, means through the vision and contemplation. Manasaha adharanam brahmani eva sthirikaranam dharana ityartha. Manasaha adharanam. The establishment or anchoring of the mind in the Brahman. Brahman alone is there. That is the establishment. Sthirīkaranam means establishment. Dhāraṇā ityarthaha is the meaning of Dhāraṇā. So the Dhāraṇā which is saying that yatra yatra mano yadi tatra tatra brahmanaha is the Dhāraṇā which is Advaita is talking about. So now the objection comes. Nanu Adharadi panchakramadye ekatra manasaha dharanam dharana idi prasiddham. Ata aha sa iti. But the 5 supports which are that in the Patañjali yoga, that it is the navel, heart, throat, etc. Mooladhara, and to Sahasra, this thing is being mentioned in the yoga. Fixing the mind on in one place is what is Patañjali yoga is saying. What is called the dharana as per the Patañjali yoga. So it is said that ata aha sa iti. Therefore, Shankaracharya says ata sa paramata dharana. Sa trokta atra utta lakshana dharana parotkrishta mata tattvabodhavatam ityartha. Tattvabodhavatam means those who are realized, those who have got established. What is the pada utkrishta padamata paramotkrishta mata meaning? What do they consider superior? Dharana, what is being defined here? Sadharana, what is that? That yatra yatra mano yadi tatra tatra brahmana darshan. Anya tu Patañjala abhimata prāṇāyāma adivada apareti bhava. Otherwise, that dharana which is there in the Patañjali, this thing, is where the yogic dharana, like prāṇāyāma, pratyahara, etc., that is inferior because it will not make you realize the abidance in yourself. Cha eva iti avyaya dvayam Vedānta vidvat anubhava prasiddham dhyodayati. The 2 particles cha and eva in the verse is indicating what is well known in the experience of vidvat anubhava, means those who have realized it. So if you look at the redefinition of dharana, yoga says one-pointed fixation in a bodily locus like Mooladhara, etc., the navel, heart, etc. Whereas Advaita says that wherever mind goes or whatever is in the mind, see only Brahman there, stripping the name and form. Nama Rupa Vivarjitam. Deshakala Vivarjitam. So all those attributes for the objects, depending on the name and form or space and time, divide of that, there is the fundamental existence awareness in everything, without which the name and the form or the space and the time cannot be located. Therefore, the dharana, the substratum or on that object needs a substratum on which it has to have the name and form and space and time. But when you strip them of these qualifications, the existence cannot be stripped, because existence is on which these things keep on changing. So the changing is for the names and forms, not for the existence. That is where the mind goes, even though it chases names and forms, but even one starts seeing the existence and awareness on which the names and forms are attributed, such a person becomes realized. There is a universalization. No special place is required as per the Advaita. Wherever you are, whenever you are, whatever time you are in abidance in the self. Whereas in the Patañjali yoga, you have to be in a particular place, in a particular asana, posture, and then you have to concentrate on your chakra, whether it is the Mooladhara chakra or Hridaya Ajna chakra or Sahasrara chakra. You have to follow this thing. Whereas in the case of Advaita, every object is representation of Brahman. And every object is not the name and form, but existence and consciousness. Such a mind, when it is devoid of the name and form, remain anchored in Brahman. And that anchoring is called the Dhāraṇā as per the Advaita. Mind stabilized in Brahman by discriminative contemplation and is not suppression of constant recognition. In the Patañjali yoga, you need to keep suppressing your mind from recognizing objects other than the concentration version. Yogic Dhāraṇā is preparatory and external. It is the yogic, the Patañjali yoga is external in nature. And you need to prepare for it, like yama, niyama, asana, etc. Whereas Vedantic Dhāraṇā is supreme, directly nourishing the self-knowledge, Atma-jnanam. Atma-jnanam is not as a knowledge of Atma and you are the knower. No. Knowing your nature as Atma or consciousness, existence consciousness is your nature. That is the reason why the Atma-jnana is direct. This is why the Aparokshanubhuti is what is being referred. It is not an experience which is pratyaksha, etc. or paroksha as per the other means of knowledge. Here we are talking about aparoksha. It is always present and there is no sensory input required for it. That is the reason why it is vidyut anubhava. The word anubhava is used. It is a living experience of people who have started abiding in their own self. We will go to the next verse, 123. Brahma eva asmi iti, brahmaiva asmi iti, sadvritya niralambataya stitihi, dhyana shabdena vikhyata paramanandadayini. Dhāraṇā, dhyana, samadhi. These are the three things which are the final 15 steps of the final one. So Dhāraṇā we understood. Now in this verse 123, Acharya is explaining what is dhyana. Dhyana is meditation in the ordinary translation. But Acharya says that aham brahma eva asmi iti tadvritya niralambadaya sthiti dhyana shabdena vichyata sa paramanandadayini bhavati. Aham brahma eva, aham brahmasmi. When we do the dharana by abiding in the self, removing the name and form and the space and time, etc., that is the time when we realize that I am not different from the object. The subject and the object are one and the same. There is no subject, object and knowing separate. That knowledge at that stage is called Aham Brahmasmi, where I do not have separatedness from anything. I am everything. I am the one who is knowing, I am the one who is known. When that becomes my knowledge, that knowledge itself is the culmination where we say Aham Brahmasmi. Sadvritya. Sadvritti is what is being told. Tadvritti means by unassignable thought. Because that thought cannot be assigned. Because there is no subject and object in it. So the thought is there. It's a vritti is there. Brahmakara vritti we call it as. Brahma akara. It is the akara of the vritti is of the Brahman nature itself. Awareness itself becomes aware of itself. You are self-aware. Niralambadaya. There is no dependency on anything, neither the sense organs nor the mind, the intellect, etc. And abiding in that the sthiti is the dhyana shabdena vikhyata. And that when we are at that level, Paramananda Daini, it is bestowing us with the supreme bliss. Because there is nothing else to take away that. We are everything. We know everything. We are not, there is not separate anything from me. And when I am everything, there is nothing more for me to acquire or engage or achieve. There is a Purnata, Purnamata Purnamidam, Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. That Purnata, completeness, is the bliss, Paramananda, which is being referred here as when we realize that Aham Brahmasmi, that knowledge when it is happening, is the Purnata when we are achieving. There is nothing to diminish it other than me. There is nothing other than me for me to know. There is nothing other than me in the name and form. There is only me. That Purnata of mind in everything is the Aham Brahmasmi Akara Vritti, Tad Vritti. The Aham Brahmasmi Vritti is not Brahman is something separate and I now know Brahman. As a knower of Brahman, I am separate and Brahman is separate. No. Aham Eva, that is Eva and Cha, which was used in the previous sloka, to ascertain that there is nothing other than that. And when there is nothing other than that, and when we are that, is the Purnata we can achieve. Tat Satyam, Tattvamasi Shvetaketu. When Dalaga told Shvetaketu, he realized that Aham Brahmasmi. Even though he had to say it 9 times and explain with examples. From the pot to the, nail cutter to the many things which have been explained in the Chandogya Upanishad, 6th chapter. So that is what is the dhyana. As far as Patañjali, an unbroken flow of thought, Taila Dhāravat, is what Patañjali says, that even if it is an external object, not me, but if my thought is like the oil being poured from a bottle, there is no break. It is continuous and it will appear as if there is a what you call freezing of the oil which is being poured. That is the unbroken flow which is being referred in the Patañjali Dhyana. But when we are absorbed in Brahman, there is no two separate thing where the flow can happen and that subject and object are not separate. So therefore, there is no unbroken flow of thought of some particular object. There is, when everything is Brahman, there is no thought itself. Because the thought of the mind is also Brahman. It is not separate from it. So realizing that is the Aham Brahmasmi in Advaita. Vidyaranya is not explaining much on that. He says that Atha Atmadhyanam Lakshayadi Brahma Eva iti Sadvritya Sati Pramana Andara Bhada Ayogya Vritti Sadvritya Niralambata Dehadi Anusandana Rahityena Sthiti Avasthanam iti Arthaha. Shesham Spashtam. That is very clear reading. So what does he say? The meditation on the self, Atmat Dhyanam Lakshayati. Brahma Eva iti. Brahman alone aham. I am Brahman alone. Consisting of the true recognition, not modification of mind, but the mind itself becomes Brahman. Pramanandara bhada ayogya vritti. A vritti that cannot be sublated by other pramanas by means of knowledge. Pramanandara means other pramanas, other means of knowledge. Because what happens is that a knowledge is supposed to be permanent, eternal, and confirmed only when it is not challenged or disputed by other means. Now, if we look at the knowledge which we have about anything, including our mind and feelings and thoughts, they are all transient in nature. Being transient in nature, there is also pramanas which are the means of knowledge also keeps changing. What is seen yesterday, desha, kala, everything keeps changing. So, every object, including the mind and the contents of the mind, are transient and therefore refutable. There is challenges for it. Because sense knowledge they can be contradicted. Whereas the knowledge about oneself, where the mind becomes the self, that can never be challenged. Now the question can come, is it not a self-hypnotism or self-conditioning or some things, which you are assuming that there is something called self? I told that you don't have to use any name which is given in the Upanishad or the Shastra or Pramana. Nor do you want to use anything from the philosophy or the psychology or the psychiatry or anything of that matter. You don't have to use any name at all. But you cannot refute yourself. Don't call it as consciousness. Don't call it as awareness. Don't call it as Atman. Don't call it as Brahman. None of them. You don't want to call it. You should be use it. But you cannot refute your own existence, and that existence is something which is self-aware. It is not known through the sense organs. It is not known through the mind. Because if you look at that way, in the deep sleep, we don't have the mind functioning. There is no mind. If mind is there, Nama Rupa will come. Because mind is dependent on Nama Rupa. But in the deep sleep, there is no Nama Rupa because we say I knew nothing. But there is the knower of nothing present there. That knower which is present there is present all the time. Even when the mind is coming up into the waker to become the waker and the waking world. But when the mind comes, we depend upon the name and form and etc. of the mind of the world, but we do not know them as Brahman. But the moment you know that ahankara, aham brahmasmi iti vritti, that akantakara vritti, or what we call is brahmakara vritti, that everything is Brahman. When that happens, there is no mind separate, there is nothing. Even in waking, you are not conditioning yourself or hypnotizing yourself or becoming a, alternative individual. You remain, you are what you are. In that awareness which is known as I am, without name and form, that I amness, that is the aham vritti or brahmakara vritti or atma vritti, that remains irrefutably at the last. Everything is refutable. Taya vritti niramlambadaya, because there is no dependency for that vritti where I say I am. Whereas anything else, if the moment I use as a vritti in the mind, there is a dependency on an external support for object, form, concept, name, etc. Dehadi anusandhana rahityena sthiti avasthanam ityartha. Through the absence of identification with the body, the name, the space, the time, the relationship, etc., we abide in the I. Without naming it, without calling a name, because there is no name to call it. But we have, for explanation purpose, we have to use the word aham vritti or brahmakara vritti. But even that is a name. But when you are in the deep sleep in the brahmakara vritti, there was no name. The I which says that I knew nothing is not the I of the waker. But it is a memory for the waker to say, I knew nothing, because the waker knows only through the mind. And in the mind, everything has to be depending upon the name and form. When that is absent, the waker will say, I knew nothing. But the reality is that in that state, I alone was there. I was everything. There is nothing other than me. That state is the final abidance. Don't call it by any name. That is why it is said, Dehadi anusandhana rahityena, without the identification with the body, etc. Now compare between the two. Atma Dhyana is not a object meditation like that of a Patañjali yoga. Whereas the vritti takes the form of Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. It is the Akantakara vritti or Brahmakara vritti, or a thought wave reflecting Brahman, the formless Brahman, the attributeless Brahman, but as full consciousness. pure awareness, or whatever may be the term you want to use, comfortable for you, use that. But it has no attribution, no form, no nothing. It is nirguna, satta. In the Patañjali yoga, the normal knowledge like rope as a snake can be sublated. Of every object can be negated. Every object that is there in the mind due for the Patañjali yoga can be negated, reduced to Brahman, saying that is nothing but existence and awareness. The name and form are sublated. But the vritti, I am Brahman or Aham Brahmasmi, there is no pramana which can sublate it, or in other words, it is self-validating. The reason is that niralambata, because it doesn't need other than itself, nothing else. Whereas for all other knowledge, you need something else as an instrument for the pratyaksha or paroksha to know the existence of something. But existence doesn't need anything other than existence itself to know the existence and awareness. So that meditation is not the way in which Patanjali says in the Mooladhara or Atmya Chakra or Sahasrara, etc. But it is abiding in pure awareness of the essence. And this abiding is natural to all of us. All of us are that at all the time. Whether we are the waker, the Jagrat, or the dreamer, or the Sushupti. So now none of the place for you, for me, for us, there is no dependency for being I. For being anything else, there will be a dependency. Therefore, it is effortful. We have to put effort to bring in the relationship, bring the sensory organs relationship, bring the mind into it. But for knowing oneself or abiding in oneself, that is natural. And this is why it merges naturally into nididhyasana and culminates in Aparokshanubhuti. When this is in without unabated, continuous knowledge, and when you abide in that time, the knowing of the I by us is effortless and direct realization. Whereas nididhyasana is sometimes used as interchangeably for this dhyana. But there is subtle distinction that are worth understanding. The definition of nididhyasana, deep contemplation, rooted in repeated reflection on Mahavakyas, Tattvamasi Ityadi. Because Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana goes together. It is part of a practice. By hearing what is used as Tattvamasi Vakya. It is a process by which the mind becomes free of habitual doubts, which is called samshaya, and habitual superimposition, which is called viparya. That is happening with the mind as a natural thing. But when we do nididhyasana, it becomes a process which frees the mind from these samshaya viparya. Still uses Shastra Vakyas as pramana. And it is a remedial practice after Shravana and Manana. And the function of Nididhyasana is the removal of lingering tendencies, which are vasanas, in the mind with the body and mind. Because the body and mind gets attached to the vasanas. And Nididhyasana establishes conviction, nishchaya, and assimilation of jnana. Like polishing a mirror after already knowing the face is reflected in it. Your face is reflected in a mirror. You're polishing the mirror to see whether you are that reflection, to see the reflection clearly. You are already seeing it, but samshaya viparyaya are the dust particles on that mirror. How is it different from Atma Dhyana? Nididhyasana different from Atma Dhyana. The direct meditation that Aham Brahmasmi as a satvritti or a true cognition without supports of anything, nor the Mahavakyas, nothing is required. That I am aware of myself, doesn't need anything other than awareness. There the awareness and the I am, who is knowing that awareness, are not two separate. It is not a contemplation of a textual word or a mental abidance as prescribed in Shravana Manana Nididhyasana. But it is a vritti. Definitely it is a vritti because the awareness reflects Brahman as a formless wholeness, the only one, Advitiyam. It is a mental note. But the mind is now not the mind. The mind has become Amani, and that mind is now the Brahman itself. There is no doubt to be removed when we are doing that, Atma Dhyana. You don't have doubt about yourself. Aham asmi, I am there, is never doubted by anybody. Nobody will say, I am supposed to be knowing I am? That doubt. No, he knows himself as I am. Like abiding as sun itself. After polishing the mirror and seeing the light was always one's own. What we are seeing, the reflection in a mirror, we are seeing the light coming from the reflection. But the light can be reflected only when I am there. If I am seeing my reflection in the mirror, I now know that light is reflected from the mirror, but I know that light which is getting reflected is coming from me. I am the one who is knowing myself. Nididhyasana has to have repetition. Aham Brahmasmi, Tattvamasi, or Prajnanam Brahma, I am Atma Brahma, or all those things. And by doing that, you are achieving the doubts which are there primordial in the mind. And it is an effort. A contemplative process by correction, for correction. Whereas Atma Dhyana is nothing but abiding in oneself without wavering. There is no doubt. Because where can I be different from I? My knowledge about I cannot be different from I. And therefore it's an effortless resting on one's own Swarupa. There is no need of Anvaya, Vyatireka or the assertion and negation. Brahman itself is a self-established fact. But the final convergence of Nididhyasana leads to Atma Dhyana. That is, before Atma Dhyana, Nididhyasana is mandatory. And Atma Dhyana culminates in Aparokshanubhuti, or our direct realization of who we are. Depending upon the adhikari, Nididhyasana is recommended, and such an adhikari matures himself by Nididhyasana to Atma Dhyana and belongs to, then that jnana of that Atma Dhyana becomes that one, a natural state of abidance of a jnani. So when a jnani is mauna and sitting idle, doesn't mean that he is tamasic or in the dull mood. He is abiding in himself, and he has no desire to transact with the phenomenal world, because he doesn't see the phenomenal world separately. In the last class, we had a detailed discussion on that with Rajendra Rane. There is no necessity for him to interact. But it will appear to that he is interacting by others who cannot see it from the jnani's point of view. The Brihadaranya Bhashya, Shankara says, Nididhyasana is for those who have doubts remaining. But for a mature seeker, Shravana itself gives rise to Aparoksha Jnana. Shravana samakale eva jnana. Once that jnana takes place, he has no doubts. For a Pakwa Adhikari or a matured seeker, he listens that Tattvamasi and he knows that Aham Brahmasmi, and he remains in the natural abidance of that. We'll stop here and continue our class in the next Wednesday thing. I will explain some Shravana Manana Nididhyasana aspect in the coming class, which will help us to bring Nididhyasana and Atma Dhyana within the reach and not an utopian idea, or a hypnotism, self-hypnotism. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Thank you. Dhanyavad.
Thank you very much, Mindoji. Again, a very profound session, almost a summation of many classes that we have had. I've opened the hand raising, and the chat is also available. Namaste, Venkatji.
Vedāji. Namaste, Prakashji. So this is sort of very timely, Vedāji, based on the path I taken up. Thought I'll go a little deeper on each of these verses, if you're okay.
Yep, please.
So the one we talked about, Pratyahara. right?
Mm.
Pratyahara, it means also ahara, withdrawal of the mind from the food for senses, which are worldly, and pull it back, give something that it can chew on, which will take you, to inner journey from outer sensual pull to something that gives something to mind that it can latch onto. That ahara has to be complete. Basically, it's like complete food, like whole food. What I've seen in yoga is the three dimensions added. The dhyana, it's sort of a namasmarana given. Pratyahara means a namasmarana given that do it with bhakti, do it with energy. Because when you do namasmarana, if you are energyless, is of no use. Then do it with awareness. Don't, let your mind fly somewhere. You are doing namasmarana, but your mind is somewhere. So do all three together. Hence, it's a tool to bring you in. This is the method given. Whereas in the verse here, pratyahara is also, practicing this, withdrawal of the mind, absorption of the mind in consciousness. It, from in all object, whatever you see, I think as you said, see Brahman in all name and form, see Brahman. That is the method he gave, right?
Mm. Yes.
So looking at these two, it is like a namasmarana, a sort of, remembering Brahman in all that, because you are replacing, objective name and forms by recognizing that existence behind all, name and form. That's a fair consideration.
Yes. In here, what we are thinking is that this ahara is seen as ahara when it is not seen as Brahman. But the moment you see the ahara as nothing but Brahman, there is nothing called pratyahara as a activity. It becomes everything is at Brahman. So where is the withdrawal required? So where will you withdraw?
Perfect. No, this is logically correct.
Yes.
Right? While Rutti, because it's a subconscious, right? The moment anything is seen, the mind uses what is subconscious, that triggers it. It constantly triggers it because of the conditioning. Right? That is where the struggle is. Struggle is we are dealing with subconscious mind, which is constantly superimposing. Hence, there is an effort here, right? The practice is given. So while logically perfect, at the same time, the practice also helps replace, what is perceived with, remember Brahman constantly, right? By replacing whatever is arising there. So that is I think this is fair match here on the pratyahara. Now, going into the next verse, which is steadiness of the mind through realizing Brahman wherever the mind goes, with Dhāraṇā. Concentration. Now that pratyahara happened, Dhāraṇā is to now abide in this mode. Wherever mind goes, means mind goes as breathing goes. If you put it in the fair way, in the yogic method. As you breathe in, as you breathe out. I've seen the oldies, my grandmas, all that. They use either Rama or Shiva, even on the in-breath or an out-breath. Shiva. When they exhale, they say Shiva. And they inhale, oh Shiva. So look at the profoundness. They're doing it without knowing because, it has habituated in the whole households.
Right.
What is happening in the process is it is pushing that nama into the subconscious when breathing out and pulling, whatever getting pulled, replaced by Shiva. That means the mind that moves also being utilized to replace with the nama, here the constant abidance as the mind processes, that dharana is the concentration by force in yoga, because it pushes Om Namah Shivaya on breathe out, brings, and the breathe in Om Namah Shivaya. The way I've seen most effective is they use Patikalingam, because Patikalingam, while it looks like a form, when you try to remember it, because it's transparent, you automatically lose the form, while Nama remains. You see, you try, the focus of the mind is given, but at the same time, mind loses the focus on the form because of the transparency, while Nama remains. It is just a technique that, even you try to initially remember that form, but the form goes, while mind uses on breathe in, breathe out, just the Nama. Here, with the understanding, recognition, you do the Dhāraṇā, the concentrating on Brahman with the Dhāraṇā. This is this is sort of steadiness of the mind through realizing Brahman. That Dhāraṇā concentration is repeatedly pulled back into, you said, abide in Brahman, abide in oneself.
Yes.
There the abidance is given as abiding in your awareness. Basically that prajna, Shakti, prajna and bhakti. Now bhakti, prajna, bhakti and Shakti now taken out, and you are told to stay in prajna. That awareness, you used earlier for pratyahara. In Dhāraṇā, try to latch onto that, either you stay in your breathing, stay, because that's the best way. Easy way is stay with your breathing. You don't need to put an effort to concentrate here. Just Dhāraṇā means just stay as objective awareness. That was the I'm reconciling here, Paduji. Is a technique.
Okay.
Then the third one is the meditation.
Yeah.
Where remaining independent of everything as a result of unassailable thought, I am verily Brahman. This is the the way I put it, in a way you explained it. There's a Aparoksha Anubhava and Aparoksha Anubhuti. Anubhava is available. It is not a thought. Aparoksha Anubhava is recognizing that awareness within you, non-sensual. But it is I put it as an Anubhava. Maybe you can comment on it. Anubhava, constantly abiding in it, may further progress into Anubhuti. Is that a fair placement?
Yeah. See, you can explain it that way, but basically Anubhava and Anubhuti cannot be separate. Because Anubhava itself is transforming itself as Anubhuti, as a remembrance, that bliss which you are enjoying is not a bliss which is a after effect of abidance. The abidance itself becomes a bliss.
Yeah, you're right.
That is why the Anubhava and Anubhuti cannot be bifurcated. But if you think that you want to see it into a different way, go ahead.
Yeah, so the reason, because this is a conditioned mind keep you in a yoga method, because after the yogic practices, you go back to the experiential world. It falls back. Okay, repeated meditative practice, that is where the Anubhava repeats.
Yeah, but in the Advaitic method, the phenomenal world doesn't fall back. You don't see the phenomenal world as phenomenal world anymore.
Yes or no, Binduji? Because the subconscious has not subsided.
There is nothing separate from you. The subconscious is you. The mind is you. The world is you.
Because
Where
the
did
Rutti
it
is not
all?
representing.
Where did it all come from?
Perfect, Vidhuji, that the Rutti has not completely replaced, like the cycling or swimming. The Rutti continue to, because the Brahmakara Rutti or Atmakara Rutti has to be pushed into subconscious. Because of repeated, meditation by, Nididhyasana is about, abiding in the Anubhava, Aparokshanubhuti repeatedly. Hence, it become a Rutti. Due to that, it is like a practice of swimming or practice of, cycling. Then it becomes second nature. Once the practice is over, it becomes second nature. Right, Bandhaji?
Yeah, see, that is why in the Brahadharanya, Shankaracharya very clearly says, depending upon the Adhikari, most of us need practice and, the anchor like Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana or yoga method or things like that. But at the same time, he is also saying that for a Pakva Adhikari or a Uttama Adhikari, Shravana Samakale eva jnanam. That's, he is able to abide in himself by just listening once. And then he is no more he. He has lost himself into Brahman. He abides himself in that. There is no coming back into the phenomenal world for the purpose of enjoyment or transaction or anything like that. But those who are not able to see his vision will see him still continuing to eat, sleep and breathe, etc. Like how we have seen Ramana Maharshi or Nisargadatta Maharaj doing all the humanly things what is supposed to be done, but while doing that they were abiding in themselves. They will never be able to relate to the phenomenality of the world. So that abidance is the Aparokshanubhuti.
Yes,
Which we
Anubhava
are
become
talking about.
Anubhava become Anubhuti, Binduji.
Yeah.
So I get it because I put it myself in this, that samskara not happened, that distillation not happened. Agree, one who is Uttamadhikari with dry wood, Satvika, that has sort of stabilized, then in one go all this can happen, Anubhuti can happen in one go. Because this steps nicely laid out one by one has a reason for it, and I think nicely laid out. Thanks for taking us through this, Binduji.
Thank you. Good. So there is definitely levels under which we are all operating. With that duly considering as the requested or requirements for different people, methods have to be decided by oneself, because the 100% conversion into Anubhuti is only the lucky ones have got. Others all will have to do either the yogic method or the Shravana Manana Nidhyasana and then arrive at it. Thank you, Venkat. Prakash, can we close?
Yes, Binduji. I think we only have 5 more minutes. I think, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you again, Binduji.
Actually, I never thought that I'll be taking today's class because I had a dental surgery and I had a swollen lip.
Okay.
Hope you recover soon. Yes.
But once I started, I forgot about the whole thing myself.
I hope everything goes well.
Yeah, everything is fine.
Yes. Okay.
Only after the lecture is over and when finishing Venkat's talk, I felt that, my lip is still having numbness. It has not completely gone.
You have some ice cream.
But your audio was very clear.
Very clear.
Much clearer than other days.
Okay. Yes, Venkat. What you were saying?
Yeah, have some ice cream, please.
Yeah, I'll have. Thank you.
So thanks everyone for coming.
Hi, Hari Om. Thank you all. See you on Wednesday. Thank you, Prakash. Thank you, Venkat. Srini, Jai, Ganesh, Jesse, Om, R, Guru. Thank you all. Hari Om. Namaste.
Thank you, Bindoji. Hari Om.